Secret code words, satanic symbols, an underground child trafficking ring. Leading up to and following the 2016 election, rumors spread in every area of the internet that Hillary Clinton was killing children. Specifically, on November 4th, the Alex Jones podcast posted a video saying, "When I think of all the children Hillary Clinton has personally chopped up and murdered, I feel no fear standing up against her." On November 7th, the hashtag Pizzagate first appeared on Twitter. The internet's attention turned towards a local pizza shop called Ping Pong Comet. Online, the people called the owner a pedophile and harassed his business because once, the owner held a fundraiser for the Clinton campaign. Edgar Welch, a conspiracy theorist, came to the Comet one Sunday morning at 3 p.m. In his arms, he held an AR-15 assault rifle. In his pockets were a .38 caliber Colt revolver and a folding knife. Also, how crazy is this picture, by the way? This is the first thing that came up when I searched this guy up, and I'm sure that is the same gun he used when he fired it 3 times in the rocket. He found no trafficked children when the police arrived, and thankfully, nobody was harmed by this egregious act of stupidity. Shortly after Welch's arrest, rumors all over Reddit circulated that he was actually a government plant and had nothing to do with hashtag Pizzagate at all. The goal of this video is to answer the question, are ordinary people smart enough for democracy? Now, people today have been failed by their own government. I'm no political scholar by any means. I mean, this isn't even my suit. It's my roommate's. Shout out Mike. But I believe this fact is indisputable. People today, it's not their fault that they're not informed. The rise of systemic disenfranchisement and misinformation has led to fake news and people being failed by their own government. As it stands right now, the people are not smart enough for democracy, but I believe they can be. The only way they can be smart enough is if we overhaul our entire system of government entirely. Now, let's begin by looking at why our current system doesn't work, starting with blind retrospection. Critics of democracy like Plato, Aristotle, and even Woodrow Wilson say that people are not smart enough for self-governing. Specifically, they say that people can't vote retrospectively, meaning that they can't determine whether their politician has done a good job or not. At its core, blind retrospection states that when there was no one else to blame, people blame the government. An article on this topic by Christopher Aiken explains that voters' retrospections are blind, not just in natural disasters, but in hardships of all kind. In most cases, incumbents pay at the polls for bad times, even when rational observers can't find a rational basis for blame. An example of this phenomena occurred when shark attacks in New Jersey affected Woodrow Wilson's presidential election. On 4th of July weekend in 1916, crowds swarmed to the beaches of New Jersey. What they didn't know is that they shared these waters with a vicious man-eater. 4 people died in the span of 1 week. Panic had gripped New Jersey, and shark hunts were organized. Although the attack stopped when one great white shark was captured and killed, the fear didn't. Because so many government officials had houses along the beaches these attacks happened, people wondered why there wasn't more government intervention. The government said that they could do no more than offer to pay for damages and inform people these attacks were happening. The people of New Jersey were not satisfied with this and took out their anger and fear on the current government and incumbent Woodrow Wilson. The presidential election took place just a few months after the summer's events, so the terror was still fresh in the minds of the voters as they went to the polls. Now, the government obviously has no control over sharks, but this fact was irrelevant to voters. A study of New Jersey counties shows that those who lived on and around beaches voted for Woodrow Wilson much, much less than those who did not live on beaches, as shown here. This phenomenon comes from a fundamental understanding of how our government works. In order to negate this trend of blind retrospection, we need to educate the voters. Blind retrospection is also a product of our current system of government. People need someone to blame, and because the powers of Washington are so far away, they blame them because they are unseen. Where was the government when I was being attacked by sharks and my leg was being bitten off? They should have done something. Now, how do people weigh things in their mind when they go to the polls to vote? By what is immediately affecting them. This trend of people blaming the government from unpreventable disasters also struck the presidential election in 2000, when people voted against Al Gore because their states were too dry or too wet as a result of flooding and drought. And some say this is the reason Al Gore lost this election. This pattern is not just one of the past. Currently, Kamala Harris is facing a major hurricane in the home stretch of this current presidential election. And if this trend of blind retrospection continues, she will lose this election as people blame the incumbent government for a natural disaster. Misinformation surrounding the hurricane has also arisen, leading to some people not accepting federal aid. This has made the reconstruction effort even more difficult. The reason blind retrospection has become such a problem is that our current system of government has pushed the people to support a strong-armed candidate who say they will fix everything by speaking only for the people. An example of this can be found in the vice president's competition, Donald Trump. What led to people supporting populism and an egotistical liar? Well, an article by Ronald Inglehard, dumb name, identifies that for decades, the real income of the developed world's working class has been stagnant, and the material basis for what counts as an acceptable standard of living has been rising. Donald Trump presents himself as a leader who alone can face the problems faced by American politics because he speaks for the forgotten men and women of this country. When in reality, Trump speaks for billionaires, he says that he speaks for everyday Americans. He uses misinformation and fake news to manipulate the ineducation of those who will become a danger to democracy. There's been a shift in this country from class-based politics to value-based politics, and this shift stems from economic inequality. People aren't making as much as they used to, but this isn't the only reason people have turned to populism. Those who oppose recent cultural changes gravitate towards populism because they mistakenly believe that an influx in immigration has led to rising unemployment and stagnant income. An article by Pew Research has identified that Trump supporters' main area of concern is the economy, while immigration follows at a close second. The people support Trump because he's going to make the economy better. He will protect your free speech. Trump is honest, and he tells it like it is.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats.
Okay, so our current system of government doesn't work, encourages blind retrospection, and forces the people to support a populist leader like Trump. So what's the solution? To find this answer, we will be looking at 3 different forms of democracy: the epistocratic critique, deliberative democracy, and participatory democracy. The epistocratic critique states that people are ignorant, so we need to defer to experts to make all the decisions. An epistocracy recognizes that people have actually turned ignorance into a virtue. Tom Nichols, a proponent for such a form of democracy, says that to assert autonomy and reject the advice of experts is a way for Americans to demonstrate their independence from nefarious elites and insulate their increasingly fragile egos from ever being told they're wrong. An epistocracy would emphasize expertise over citizen participation or involvement. Proponents for this form of democracy argue that experts are more informed on issues so they can make more rational decisions when it comes to legislation. But just because one citizen is more knowledgeable than another doesn't mean that they are more qualified to make more politically based decisions. Adam Gibbons, a political academic, states that better informed citizens are actually less rational than their ill-informed counterparts, being more susceptible to various biases, more partisan, and less open-minded. The main problem with the epistocratic critique is that it excludes the ordinary voter from the decision-making process entirely. The whole issue of Trump and people believing misinformation arises from a lack of belonging. They feel forgotten by their society, so they look for a strong leader to speak out for their silent majority. Now, if we take even more power from the average voter and leave it all to experts, the desire to educate oneself will decrease even more than it already has. Why even slightly educate yourself in some issue if some expert is going to decide for you in the end anyway? Another obstacle an epistocracy cannot overcome is the fact that there are no true experts, only those more knowledgeable in some fields of study than others. Epistocracy's obsession with expertise alienates the public while placing experts in a position that promotes their agendas and biases. Therefore, it is not the right fit for America. There should be more focus on ordinary citizens talking to solve issues. This is exactly what deliberative democracy attempts to do. Deliberative democracy consists of a talk-based approach to political conflict. It asserts that people can be smart enough for democracy only if they use reason, are educated properly, and can deliberate respectfully. Through disagreement, argument, and corroboration, political policy can be set by the people. Now, the largest piece of evidence for a deliberative democracy is the creation of mini-publics. Mini-publics are like citizen juries that are chosen relatively randomly, and they deliberate on an issue. Now, mini-publics have seen their success in that people are reported to leave these experiments being more open-minded towards opposing political parties and more respectful to differing political affiliations. The drawbacks of deliberative democracy lie in its toothlessness, its overabundance of stipulations, and its overestimation of a citizen's ability to be reasonable. Now, talking can only get you so far. Change requires action, and deliberative democracy offers no way for people to go from talking to actually doing. Deliberation is a great way to confer with people who will be reasonable. However, human nature is to hold biases which cloud our ability to reason. Deliberative democracy falls short because people hold their values too closely to their chest. Finally, deliberative democracy has too many stipulations which need to be met in order for it to be effective. It will only work if these people are educated, if there are unbiased experts to educate them, and if rationality can trump animality. It does not take into account the fact that some people do not want to be educated, there are no unbiased experts, and people are inherently prejudiced. Deliberative democracy is nice in theory, but like the epistocratic critique, it is not the right fit for America. We need a way to educate the people while empowering them to govern themselves. This is the very definition of participatory democracy. Participatory democracy is the broad, direct involvement of the people in politics. This theory concedes that people are stupid, but they can be educated through politics. Now, it would give the people a chance to educate themselves by governing themselves. And through this experience, they would become more familiar with America's current political state and problems, and maybe even ideas on how to remedy it. Deliberative democracy states that the government should be a part of our daily lives, as democracy isn't just a way of governing, it's a way of living as well. Empowering the people would devolve authority to the local level, so school boards and local elections could see to the needs of their communities as they see fit. While this theory sounds promising, participatory democracy has too much faith in one thing: a citizen's desire to be involved. What if the people want nothing to do with governing? Participatory democracy assumes that people want any power at all, but who would want to leave their job and making money to engage in something as tedious as local politics? Aristotle himself conceded that the need to make a living prevents people from having a proper education and engaging in governing. Participatory democracy only works if the people want a more active role in the democratic process and if there's unbiased experts to educate them. The people may not be ready for the responsibilities of self-government, and they might not want them. The current state of democracy is in shambles. In this current age of instant communication, conspiracy theories, and fake news, the people no longer want to be educated. They do not listen to those who try to educate them. They close their mind off from anything that even remotely resembles reasoning or rationality. They eat misinformation for breakfast like it's cereal and go back at lunch and dinner. This isn't their fault. The current state of American democracy has failed them. Overbearing government intervention has forced this lifestyle on people. We need to give power back to the people and create a smaller federal government. Participatory democracy has its flaws, but the quality which makes it so appealing is the fact that you can literally yell at your local politicians. Now, because the government is so centralized, it makes it easy to voice your opinions and have your concerns be heard. Instead of an unseen power at Washington, your lawmakers are just a few doors down the road. You stupid! This holds politicians more accountable for their actions than if they just hidden the Beltway. If this idea of smaller government is implemented, it will reduce the effects of misinformation, as big politicians aren't manipulating millions of people to vote for them. Instead, local elections can be carried out with some semblance of dignity and respect, as they just want what's best for their community and small town. The Hoover Institute states that shrinking the federal government may sound as utopian as fixing our schools or restoring journalistic integrity. The difference, however, is that the federal government and its entitlement programs need money, and our $18 trillion debt, trillion-dollar deficits, and our $130 trillion in unfunded liabilities is unsustainable. Sooner or later, the time will come when a smaller federal government is imposed on us by necessity. The smaller the federal government, the easier it is for us to have the knowledge of how to manage it. If people want to learn by doing, they will fail time and time again. Failure, however, is a great way to educate oneself and improve. Trial and error may be the key to the future of America. While people are not yet ready for self-government, there may yet be hope for humanity. The best way to educate and inform the citizenry is to empower local governments with an emphasis on participatory, democratic thinking. The only reason school boards become corrupt is because local elections are flooded by money for attack ads from super PACs. Elections need to be reformed so they aren't just decided by which candidate has the most money. This will force candidates to focus on their values and what issues they will address if elected. American democracy is broken, but it can be fixed. We just need to return power to the people and stop misinformation at its roots by taking influence away from corrupt political actors. The local citizen can be intelligent, and this was on full display during the COVID-19 pandemic. What an ugly car, by the way. This was on full display in such cases as when families would wish each other happy birthday from their cars in March of 2020. And now this was a solution that both kept each other safe while also finding a way to celebrate. With millions out of work during the pandemic, communities came together to provide food and other necessities to those who were affected by COVID. Humans were given the power of critical thinking. This gift can be fully realized when power is given back to the people and they can educate themselves in a political environment. Americans are not currently smart enough for democracy, but they absolutely can be once faith in the democratic process is restored through major changes which extinguish the roots of misinformation and return the power to govern back to the people. He will protect your... I just said that. People are like citizen juries where relatively small groups of people are chosen relatively randomly to deliberate on an